A report carried out by the Women's Rights Network says the majority of police forces in England and Wales allow trans-identifying biologically male officers to strip search women. At least 34 out of 43 forces have either implemented the policy or intend to. This all stems from December 2021, when the National Police Chiefs Council approved a policy paper proposing that officers be permitted to strip and even intimately search suspects of the opposite sex if the officer self-identifies as the same gender as the person being searched. Retired Police Superintendent Cathy Larkman authored the Women's Rights Network report entitled State-Sanctioned Sexual Assault, and she joins me now. Welcome to the show. I want to ask you first about the title, State-Sanctioned Sexual Assault. People watching will think that's quite an alarmist title, that's quite shocking. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I don't think it is alarmist. I think it's a very accurate title, Andrew, to describe what's happening here, because this is the first instance at the very highest level that police chiefs, the chief constables of the forces of this country, have mandated an action which isn't, in fact, the law according to the legislation they're supposed to cover. So they've actually mandated the fact that, you know, people can strip search the opposite sex.
So the law is that that cannot take place, that a police officer cannot strip search a member of the opposite sex, but the NPCC are saying we should ignore the law effectively and think in terms of gender identity, not biological sex. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's important to say this isn't the first time. They've sneaked this in below the radar before in 2012 for prisoners in custody to self-identify who they wanted to search them.
Right.
So whether they wanted a policewoman or a policeman to search them. They sneaked that in the legislation, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. But in December 2021, they made a decision at the highest level to allow that to happen for pre-arrest searching. So you could be stopped and searched on the street, and you could be strip searched or given a more thorough search. The law says that should be an officer of the same sex.
Yes.
But
well,
they made
sense.
the decision that you can self-identify. From the moment you self-identify, that officer can do it to that member of the public.
It just seems extraordinary because, you know, if you are a suspect, not even someone who's been arrested, but a suspect can be searched. Is that correct? Yeah,
that's absolutely right. And it's important to bear in mind there are around about 500,000 stop searches carried out in this country every year. A proportion of those will be strip searches.
Yes.
Only about a quarter of those will end up being arrested, you know, males and females, children as well. This affects, you know, you regardless of your age as well. And a strip search, it's extremely humiliating and degrading. You know, I have carried out strip searches. I have supervised strip searches. They can easily go very, very wrong. And you have to bear in mind the dignity of the person. The law says it must be an officer of the same sex.
Yes.
So as well as the person being searched, just think of the policewomen, you know, and policemen as well. But obviously I'm particularly speaking about policewomen there are tens of thousands of them in this country who have had no voice in this decision.
That's fascinating. I mean, you're a retired superintendent, so when you were working with the police force, had this come in at that point? Would it ever have crossed your mind that this is something that the police could do?
I suspect, and I know from the policewomen that we speak to and the police officers we speak to, that they are not fully informed in relation to this. You know, police chiefs really have sort of sneaked this in on them. They certainly haven't consulted them.
Yes. It seems to be a broader problem. The NPCC, but also the College of Policing seems to be sneaking in these kind of ideas. People are going to be surprised, though, because surely bodies such as the police chiefs and the people who train the police, the College of Policing, they should know the law, shouldn't they?
They absolutely should know the law, and they should be complying as well with their own internal ethical code.
Yes.
They're totally failing to do that. You know, they're here to serve the public and police with consent. These are really, really important principles for policing in this country. They're failing to do that. And if you read the policies, the policy that was approved by the National Police Chiefs Council, it's entirely saturated with gender ideology phrases that have no place in the law of this country. Self-ID is not the law in the UK.
And it's interesting, the NPCC has removed the guidance from their website. What does that signify?
Well, I think it signifies they're rattled because, you know, lots and lots of women particularly, but men too, have, raised an almighty storm in relation to this. And obviously the Women's Rights Network report has landed very, very hard. Within 2 days, that was raised in a Home Affairs Select Committee hearing with the policing minister, and received, a lot of attention as a result. So I think they are rattled, but we shouldn't take too much comfort from that. There shouldn't be a celebration. There shouldn't be a party that they've somehow removed this. They've stated they are reviewing that guidance, but the forces that have implemented it have already changed all their policies. So until such time as they pull their policies and they stick to the law of the land, then the situation still remains.
It does strike me that, they'll say we'll revise our policy, but they've done this before with other issues. There is a perception that the police in England and Wales have a very partisan view when it comes to debates around gender identity ideology, and in particular have even been accused of targeting and harassing women with gender-critical beliefs. So this is... Am I right in saying this is really deeply embedded in the police service?
Oh, the roots are very, very deeply embedded, and we know the frustrations of police officers and police staff who are telling the Women's Rights Network directly of their frustrations and their fear as well of speaking out in relation to this as well. They're exasperated with the way the policing is going.
And how has the response been to your report?
The response has been excellent. That report wouldn't have been possible without numerous women at a grassroots level making that happen via letters, emails and Freedom of Information Act requests.
Yes.
And they have made that possible. It should not be down to individual women to make our police forces change and listen and comply with the law of the land, but yet here we are.
Yes, so if it wasn't for these people just asking questions again and again and pushing back, the police would be perfectly happy to just push this through. No one would ever know, in other words.
No, and exactly that. This has been going on, as I said, for, after arrest, for people in custody to self-identify since 2012, and that's been highlighted in previous reports.
Yes.
But since December 2021, there was a significant expansion. So not only for prisoners to self-identify, but, obviously people prior to arrest to self-identify, and for police officers to self-identify as well. And another thing, Andrew, from this is the stated intentions of this policy is to attract more individuals to the police service who identify as the opposite sex. I just say for a moment, just to reflect on that for a second, this is actually being waved as a carrot, the opportunity to strip women naked and search them, as an enticement to employment in the police service. What does that say?
That's very interesting, because a lot of people say, oh, well, people who are concerned about single-sex spaces, they're always suggesting trans people are predators. But, of course, what you're suggesting there is this opens a loophole to people who are predatory. Not that trans people are inherently predatory, but that people will exploit predatory people will exploit loopholes that are available.
This shouldn't be rocket science to the police. We deal, well, I still say we, deal with safeguarding all the time. It should be the very first concern for both the police and other organisations as well, and yet on this occasion, it clearly isn't.
Well, you're from the Women's Rights Network. Can people look at that online? Is there a website or something?
Yes, we have a website. The report is available on there as well. And I'd ask everybody, if you can have conversations with your local police chief, your MP, please do so.
Fantastic. Cathy Larkman, thanks so much for joining me.